So, anyways, we'll start with this particular question, no, which you had. What is the goal of life? And so, as I said, nobody can give you your goal, and it's not fair. Also, whether it be parents, teachers, nobody should give you a goal. But there are some general things which we need to know, and then we have to figure it out ourselves. So, if you look at creation, one way we can get hint is when we look at creation. Second is when we look at ourselves. So, in creation, the most happening thing is constant change. Many philosophies have been written on this. Second, this change as a direction. That's something which we don't speak about. So, if you look at things from matter till man, it has a direction. And if you look at the direction, it's like more and more capacities of expression which is happening, because in the background there is an evolution of the basic consciousness, which means the awareness and the power in different ways. Like we have a different mode of working of power which is consistent with our knowledge. So we don't have the power which a brute animal has. Animals are not brutes, human beings are, but by that aside. So we have different kind of power, and sometimes much more devastating. So as evolution takes place, knowledge and power and the capacity for joy, because this is the original Trinity, Satchidanand. So you'll always see these three in every plane. Animals have a very limited self-existence, they have a limited consciousness, and they have a limited joy. They also have their level, and so we see lower and lower down. In human beings, this capacity increases. The whole thing is that, is this the end? Logically, it would seem absolutely absurd, and I'm saying this, I had not read a single book, not only by Sri Aurobindo and the mother, but nobody. Whatever I had read, Western and Eastern, didn't appeal to me. But one thing I made logical sense is that evolution can't stop with human beings. That's something which is absurd to imagine that, whatever be the reason behind, call it evolutionary energy, call it God, call it consciousness, but whatever thing from inside, call it even nature, which has created man out of dust, cannot stop with man. I mean, it makes unless we destroy ourselves. But even there is a plan B. When I look at nature, I see plan B. So dolphins are plan B, arrested evolution. So one way we can look at it is that there is evolution of consciousness and the instruments. And since that's what is happening in nature, that should be our goal also. We have to be aligned with whatever nature is encouraging. And if we take this line of approach, then we will see there are two phases in individual's life as well as in the collective life. There are phases when everything is conserved and preserved at a certain step. Evolution proceeds like that. And the second is where there is a leap. In biology, we call it saltatory leap. Maybe you have read about it. So there are phases of life individually and collectively when we are outwardly stagnating, but we don't call it stagnation. We are very happy because we have reached a comfort zone. And then comes a phase when we start feeling that we are stagnating. Now that's when nature is preparing us for a leap. Automatically it happens in individual's life as well as life of a nation or a group of humanity, that we have stagnated for long. We need to do something about it. There is restlessness, there is stifling. So that means now nature is preparing you for a leap. Okay, and then the next step is where evolution is fast forward. There is a leap. And between this comfort zone and the leap, what intervenes is crisis. This is how we see every time individual's life. You can understand this way, you can understand life of a community, you can understand the life of nation and civilizations like that. But this is too big and too philosophical a name. So let's start looking at ourselves. As human beings, one thing for sure we are programmed for is progress. Doesn't matter which way. Now, we all define progress based on the level at which we understand life. So when we look at life purely physically, we think physical progress. Physical progress may mean physically being in good, robust health, outwardly having a lot of comfort, luxuries. So because we are right now still on the physical vital way of looking at life, and this unfortunately sometimes can be purely a conditioning. So I know individuals who question this कि अरे यही काम है क्या, पैसा कमाना, घर बना लेना. So there are individuals, particularly the fact is because we from the Indian background, there is a kind of inbuilt programming in our very fabric of culture that this cannot be the entire goal of life. But yet there is a kind of conditioning in certain cultures, civilization. It's not about being good or bad or high or low, but the whole consciousness is only centered around the physical and the vital. Joys of life, enjoyments of life, pleasures of life, and the physical bodies. And we know where it leads. It is like, chocolate which is poisonous. Unlike pills which are bitter, but they may help you. But it's like chocolate, candies, but candies contain within it drugs and things which can be very dangerous and poisonous. So this is how a whole, sometimes a civilizational structure can be built around this idea. Then there can be progress which is intellectual, which is really worthy of being man. Minimum, leave aside spiritual. By intellectual I mean the will to know more. And that means not to be satisfied with any limited theory or belief, be it scientific or religious. Let me put it like that. Scientific means, oh, Harvard Journal mein likha hai, therefore it is true. I used to challenge all these things. So I said, I used to challenge even the scriptures, but equally all these things. ये वैक्सीन लेने से ठीक वही हो जाएगा. So I want not just evidence but proper hard evidence, and I would see that much of evidence is tilted. That was during my MBBS, I used to challenge. So, question and seek. This is the way that the mind progresses. Equally with belief systems. See, sometimes mind can get trapped into belief system. We were discussing the other day कि rituals, हम सब करते क्यों, अरे कर लो, बताया गया है, कुछ हो जाएगा ये. No, we shouldn't do like that. We should understand, is there a process behind it? And if there is a process, we need to understand it. Maybe some people discovered something and we have forgotten the logic of it. Because when you do the same thing mechanically, it is not so helpful. In fact, it can even be a kind of harm because it's almost like, we all know कि ये cut कर देना है, abscess है तो cut करना है. But if we don't understand the process and why we are doing it, a premature cut can be as dangerous as, delaying it and doing it without proper precaution. Then we may discover new ways. We can do away with the rituals. Like I may do a ritual today morning, we were discussing this, to invoke a deity, Shiva or Krishna or whoever. But at the same time, I may discover ways and means to do the same thing without all these elaborate processes, which were okay at one point of time, but today I need not do that. I need not actually light up a fire and do Sanskrit mantras, which many of us have forgotten. But I may simply say, Lord Shiva, I love you, and go into a quiet meditation, and he may be more happy for all you know that, okay, here is somebody who knows that I understand all languages. Okay, so, and then we understand still further. We may evolve to a point where we understand Shiva belongs a being of higher consciousness, but we can also evolve and become one with his Shantimay Swarup, or sometimes his Raudramay Swarup, and we can embody that consciousness inside. That's how human beings grow into gods. So now you see, when we understand the logic behind religious things, again we progress. So progress should not be just taking for granted, whether scientific, अरे सब ने बोला है, वहाँ यूनिवर्सिटी में पेपर है, therefore you believe it. No. Equally, like just because everybody believes in a religious doctrine, therefore, you see what danger the world is facing today because of this kind of fanaticism and extremism, because people are just following something which was written 2000 or maybe 1600, 1700 years back, and blindly people are doing it. There may have been some truth, discovered that truth. So progress at every level, intellectual level, comes by questioning and expanding, by going to the depths of whatever is there. And there is a third level of progress, which is what is called as spiritual. So spiritual is when we begin to somewhere feel that all that intellectually I can know or understand, there is something which still eludes. some people take this form ki creator kya hai? What has created this? This question can arise. I used to have this. Is there a creator at all or no? And then you have questions. When you look at the world, then you wonder ki really there is a God who is all good. Look at how life is. So then you begin to seek. And all crisis of life should be for a seeking. So we take this example of spiritual progress from two different lines along which it has gone. One is Buddha. He saw that people are dying, they fall ill. And when he saw death, he wondered why it is there. He didn't take it for granted. Okay? So he wanted to understand why there is death and why there is suffering. So he went deep inside and he discovered a way out of the suffering and out of death. And his logic was, if you are not born, you don't die. And how is there a way that individual can escape entirely this cycle in which we are caught? So he found a way, and we all know that way. But on the other hand, we see Savitri, as Sri Aurobindo reveals in Savitri. Savitri is also confronted with the phenomena of death. So she takes it as a challenge to discover why there is death. Can it be changed? Can human beings escape the grip of death? Now, people with an a priori assumption, which is unscientific, will say, array, this all. But truly speaking, a scientist should not make any assumptions. He should say, okay, if there is a way, I must find it. And she finds the way of another kind. So, spirituality is not just about, doing some bhajan, kirtan and homam, japam, but to find ways and means of making the human condition and the earth condition better, but through the intervention of a higher and greater consciousness. Because one thing we know that humanly we have messed up. I mean, unless we flatter ourselves, we have messed up. I mean, without a doubt. Look at the amount of drugs being consumed, both to keep ourselves happy. You see why there is so much drugs in a society, the reason. One simple reason is people are unhappy. It is a sign that there is too much unhappiness. And this unhappiness is not individual. It is in the atmosphere. It's, you may find it very strange why, but it's in the collective consciousness which grips. And the more you put life on a track which it is not meant to be, it on a so-called fast track, it makes you more and more unhappy. It is like reminding you, this is not the way. Take another route, take another route. So, look at the amount of drugs which we have today. Also, depression, one of the biggest killers. Why people should be very happy with all the wonderful progress we have made. So, obviously something is amiss. So spiritual consciousness is meant to make life better so that we can be freed from all these false and artificial ways of somehow being happy. Just imagine, happiness should be a natural state. I mean, every child, when a child is born, is happy, isn't it? What happens then? Who is responsible? If you look at it, something is wrong, seriously wrong, and we still are not looking into the real problem. We are providing chocolate, but isn't it every child is happy? You see children, then as they grow up, for some reason, unhappiness comes, God knows from where. Maybe the world around, the society around, and then they try to get over this unhappiness by all kinds of things, ways and means. But it gnaws at the... So spirituality is not about... So spiritual progress is to look at the root causes, the root problems of existence and to solve it. One need not use the word God. Buddha never used the word God. But to look at the root causes of suffering. Look at the root causes or root ways, fundamental ways by which we can be always in a state of joy, peace, minimum, which every human being should have, has a right to have. Truth, we may use the word truth, we may not use the word God. So, this is the threefold progress that man makes. One is material, stage one, what shall I say, primary, then intellectual, higher secondary. and spiritual, which is graduation. And everybody is destined to take this course today or tomorrow. That's why you have the cycle of rebirths. That one day a time comes when this progress no more satisfies us. You can do it, but it doesn't satisfy you. Then you go into intellectual progress. Then a time comes when even this doesn't satisfy you because it is not telling us the root problem or the radical remedy. It is only doing, in Hindi we have a term lipapoti, denting and painting. So we want to change the car. It's कितने बार denting painting करो. So that's where, so this is the goal of human existence. In each individual's life, it will translate differently, also depending on the stage one is. You can't push people. And I suppose the sign that one is ready for the next level is when one begins to question. If you ask this question, what is the goal of life, means you are ready for the next leap. I'll put it like that. Otherwise, the question doesn't arise. Most people are very happy with their life as it is going on. And best not to disturb them. Because life will teach. There is nothing like converting anyone. Life will lead you. It's a conscious force which is behind life. That's how Sri Aurobindo says. A conscious force is the architect. It looks random, but it will push human beings. So for long we cannot be satisfied only with vital pleasures and physical joys. We will be pushed to question and understand. So progress in whatever way, ultimately this progress is going towards perfection. Perfection at every level, and that's why we are unhappy. We want a perfect job, perfect partner, perfect children, perfect parents, perfect love, perfect knowledge, perfect joy. So, and all of them together, which is what perfection is about. Not one thing sans another. And when we look at the way we have understood divine, basically, what is the divine? It's the perfection we are seeking in life. And because He is there, we are seeking it. We can put it that way. Because that seed is hidden inside us, so we are seeking. But we need not call God or divine, we may use the word perfection. But why we are seeking? Because we are carrying that image inside the heart. Children do it, very unconsciously, even when they rebel against their parents. So, but basically when they grow up, they are moving along certain lines which they have picked up as a child, taken that image inside. So something similar applies, that because divine is in our heart, we seek the divine, but unconsciously we want the partner to be perfect. We want outer life to be perfect, but that perfection comes when we discover the origin of perfection. And that is what the divine is in all his ultimate splendor, and that is what is called as the supermind. Supermind is the divine in all his glory and perfection, the creator. At the mind you can experience the divine, but in one aspect or the other. God of love, God of beauty, and these gods sometimes fight also. God of knowledge, God of power, all these gods which are aspects of the divine. In the supermind, all these aspects, impersonal, personal, whatever you may call it, individual, universal, transcendent, they are all fused beautifully and harmoniously in one single whole. So supermind is the original splendor of the creator. People had glimpses of the divine through the veil of the mind. So they said divine is this or that. This or that. But when one discovers the original, then you find him everywhere, in everything, expressing himself through everything. So that's why Sri Aurobindo uses the term supermind. So we can equally say that the goal of human life is to manifest supramental perfection upon earth. We can say it like that. To manifest the divine perfection upon earth. Whichever way, these are terms. But this is the logic. And till man does it, he will not be content. Because he is born for that. If it has to happen through man, that's where the question was, can man do it or a new species? And new species was pakka, lekin whether man is the one through whom the new species will be formed, or man will be wiped out. Even this is the question Mother and Sri Aurobindo have contemplated. I mean, nature has done it. Nature ke liye kya hai? Another 1 million years. It means nothing in the twinkling of an eye. So this is where we stand today, that shall we become the happy bridges? It's like Krishna telling Arjun ki this battle is a foregone conclusion. If you will be the instrument, you have the privilege and the joy. Otherwise, what I have decided is bound to be. So right now we stand on that brink where if man chooses, then man has the privilege and the joy of evolving consciously into another new species. Man doesn't choose, still it will be. But that is ways and means that the divine will find. Okay, the answer has gone way beyond the scope of, but it's good to deal with the subject from every angle.
But Alok, there's a concept of over mind and different level of intellect, intuitions, and
so basically it is So what exactly? So basically it's very simple. If we don't go into definition, see what happens when we read and we define, then we are stuck with trying to understand the definition. But let's put it like that we stand on the crossroad of evolution of consciousness. There is consciousness in animals, plants, matter. Well, I can argue that scientifically also that there is, but let's take for example that animals do have consciousness. They have a limited consciousness. Plants also have, but very limited. They respond to touches, they respond to vibrations, they respond to music. And matter also has, we don't know it, but if you go strictly into the most stringent logic, if matter didn't have consciousness, it won't have evolved. So it's not like a magic box that things are coming out when they are not there. So whatever it be, there are levels of consciousness below us. Now, is there something levels of consciousness beyond man? Well, that's where yogis and mystics come in. They affirm that there are levels of consciousness beyond us in which cognition, perception, action, everything changes. For instance, we right now understand things by sensory data and logical analysis, isn't it? But mystics will say that there is an intuitive way of knowing things. So if we are not to just brush it aside a priori and not start playing a Richard Dawkins, then we'll explore it. That is it really there? Now all mystics who take to these approaches, they discover that there is consciousness beyond the human. So that's when the levels come. Is it just one level or there are several levels? So beyond human, what happens? Right now we look at the world very physically. A ship is a ship, water is water, ocean, mountain is a mountain, tree is a tree, sky is the sky, and we understand the process of the mechanism. Now the next level of seeing is where you begin to see them as symbols. And you start seeing this symbol which is outside equally applies to me within. Don't we use the word steady like the mountain? We use this word even for human beings, no? He is steady in his will, steadfast, like the rocks, like the hills. Life was flowing like a river, vast as the ocean, vast as the sky. So then we see that these images in creation or material nature are basically, Sri Aurobindo would use the word, a thought of God, which is manifesting in this way in material nature. It will manifest in a different way in our psychological well-being experience. And then we will see how Vedic rishis use this imagery, double imagery, so beautifully. Like cow, a giver of plenty. So if you look at cow, why particular cow? Everything of cow is useful. Even her dung is used. So it's very interesting that she is a giver of plenty. So similarly, horse, power. So at every level, nature is trying to create something which she has only one image, but usi ko It is expressing it materially through these ways, psychologically through these ways. So the mind that looks at life like this is the higher mind. So it naturally deals with things very differently. It doesn't go to a mountain only because let me go for a change. It goes to mountain because it feels, this is Shiva's abode, and Shiva is not just Mount Kailash up there, but that's how the higher mind looks at it. Then beyond the higher mind, there is the next level, where you not only see things as they are, but you see the deeper intent which is hidden in this creation. So that's where we are beginning to get into the illumined mind, and then there is a direct contact with everything. And you intuitively begin to become aware of the mountain speaks to you, let me put it like that. It's no more just a mountain which is symbolic, but the mountain speaks to you. The ocean, you communicate. That's why we see in Ramayana, Ram is standing with his bow and arrow and saying, will you do friendship with me, or do you want to take the challenge of my arrow? And why? Because Rama is in that state of illumination that he can communicate with the ocean, with the consciousness of the ocean. And that's the illumined mind. And then there is the intuitive mind, where this becomes, intuitive mind is like right now our knowledge is clamped up within a small frame of time. We look back at the past and we project into the future, but how much we project, we know it. Any person who has crossed 25 knows that, or 30, knows all my calculations, logical planning work for very little. We must do it because that's our dharma, but we know that it doesn't really work out the way we. So, an intuitive consciousness will, however, see through a large space automatically. It will see that logically you are here and you should have been there, but actually you are going there. So how to understand it? It's like supposing you are seeing a thing from above, that a car is coming from this direction and another car from this direction. And supposing you ask these people who are sitting in the car, where are you going? They will say, I am going to destination A. You'll say, I am going to destination B. Okay, very logical. But supposing you had a drone view and you could calculate the speed, you will automatically see they are going to collide with each other. Neither will reach the destination, because you have the larger picture. So intuitive mind is like that. It sees through large spaces of time because it is more uplifted, its vision is more global. And the overmind sees the entire panorama, not the all-comprehensive like the supermind sees in all directions, but it will see one part, but it will see it in total panorama. It will see another part, it will see like a panoramic vision you have. So in our mind, each aspect of the divine has its own empire. Let's say, supposing you stand for justice, so you will look at everything from the point of view of justice. Somebody stands for compassion. You see how it can come in conflict with each other. Third person stands for power. Fourth stands for knowledge. The four great goddesses of the overmind. No? So in overmind there are number of godheads. Why godheads? Godheads means powers and aspects of the one divine. Assume so many aspects to govern this creation. And these are primarily four because the divine has these four aspects. Sat, existence, again very logical actually, one can experience, but that apart. Everything has something of an existence in it. No, it exists, so it has existence. Everything, as we said, has something of the consciousness within it. Even when it is unconscious, still there is consciousness operating in an atom, for example. Everything has some force in it, for sure, which is what is driving even the atom, electron, everything. Some force is there, no? That's why it is being driven. And everything has something of that ananda in it. Even if that is not aware, just look at even the atomic structure moving at a high speed or a galaxy. You will feel that joy which is, the galaxy poor fellow may not know. Arey, mujhe dekh ke people are feeling so happy. So these are the four original aspects of the divine which are called as Sat, Chit, Tapas and Ananda. And Indian mind has given beautiful names to them. Infinite existence is Brahma. All existences are formed by him. Infinite consciousness is Vishnu, infinite force is Shiva, and infinite Ananda is Krishna. So they saw these everywhere. So in overmind, one understands things like this. So one sees Krishna in everyone. Basically, that it's the same Ananda which is moving this whole creation. A devotee of Vishnu sees consciousness in everyone. Devotee of Shiva sees that force which is operating in material nature and everywhere else. So in overmind, you discover these great Godheads, each absolute in his own right. But still the last reconciling truth is not there. What really is the relation between these four aspects of creation? That you discover in the supermind, where all of them fuse into one single perfect whole. To take another human example is that as a human being, if I am a father, I'll deal in one way. If I am a friend, in another way. As a husband, in another way. As a son, in another way. As a teacher, in another way. As a doctor, in another way. As an author, in another way. But are they different persons? No, they are the same person. So when I'm away from all these activities, I am this totality, indescribable totality, because it has not expressed itself. So same way, the divine is that one complete whole, that indescribable completeness, whole that we are seeking. But because it's beyond our comprehension, because if you meet me sitting quietly and say, Alokda, kya? So I may say, who is Alokda also, because even name and form is not there. But if I am writing, then you will say, Alokda, kya likh rahe ho? This tangible, right? What are you writing in? If I am seeing a patient, you may understand that, okay, healing thing is going on. But I don't exist by these things. I exist even if none of these were there. So even the gods are subject ultimately to dissolution. But the one is not. He is beyond all that. So that's why only when that mystery, we may use the word mystery, because if nothing is expressed, then it's a great mystery. So supermind is that original womb of all things. Just like an author who has not, Vyasa is sitting. You will ask, Vyasji, kya karne wale ho? You say, I don't know. I am enjoying. Then after some time, if you ask him, kya karne wale ho? Mahabharat likh raha hu. Abhi kya karoge? Bhagavad Puran likhunga. Abhi kya karoge? Arey, mauj masti hai. I am just having the joy of creation. All this is in Vyasa, held within. So supermind is the meeting point where all that is held within and all that is expressed, they meet. That's why it's called as the junction. All that is held within, that original divine which is beyond. And all that is expressed and manifest, uska jo junction hai, that's called the supermind. So how it begins to get expressed, now when we see from that side, it brings out four original Godheads. Then each one brings out multiple Godheads. Each Godhead is, and God, who are these Godheads? They are, we can look at them as when you have the solar energy coming from the same sun. First you will have, big, whatever hubs, jahan pe you will store that energy. Then you will have distribution systems. Then you have locally those bulbs and other fittings. So same way creation proceeds from above downward. There is the one solar. And from there are million Godheads released in the supermind. Original four, and from there many. Each Godhead will start working in some aspect of creation. That is the beauty of Sanatana Dharma. So they see in stone also there is a Godhead. In river there is a Godhead. In tree there is a Godhead. And each of them is connected ultimately to the one whole. And through any of these Godheads you can reach there. So that's what the overmind is, where now the expression has begun. In supermind, they are held within. You will ask Vyas, what are you going to do? He'll say, we'll see. Next step you ask, what are you doing? Writing the Mahabharata. Now writing the Mahabharata becomes overmind. Different characters. Krishna will be there, Arjuna will be there, even Duryodhan will be there. And then each will have his own independent life. That becomes lower and lesser, till finally it enters into the whole material creation. But even in material creation, these Godheads are working. So Agni is working in its highest, it is the divine will and divine force and divine knowledge. Agni has these both aspects, it is light and force. So you can refer to Agni as the supreme wisdom and supreme force. But equally, that Agni, you will see the same Agni at the material level, it becomes that fire which you worship. So that's why we will see that we have Agni Hotra, which is basically as a symbol. But that same Agni you will also discover inside in our psychological aspiration. So this way you understand the unity of creation, the grand narrative. So in the supermind, it is in its original highest status, and lower down it's in lower and lower. There is also a Jathar Agni, there is Jad Agni, there is Bhuk, which Agni takes this form also. It takes everything and finishes it. It's the fire of purification. So in supermind you will see everything in its original splendor. So in supermind we realize that Agni is divine will, which is knowledge and power of force and wisdom together. But as it comes down, it becomes all these various Agnis. So if you have to really discover the original power and wisdom, you have to go to that, refer back to that. That's why it's so important, the importance of supermind, because without it, we'll always remain incomplete. Even if we worship a Godhead and go through Him, He will take us to the divine, but the fullness we cannot get.
Well, what you are understanding, I think I read and also most of the time I go through your lecture. Yes, this is big power, big Agni. If I go in economic term, macro level and micro level.
Yes.
In macro level, they are saying that is big Agni, big force. Micro level, we are the individual. The question is, without going to that far, what you do personally, so we can really follow a little bit, so that we can achieve at the micro level some Agni force.
Wonderful. So we can take it like this, that there are 3 levels at which this operates. Let's first put it like that. One is the transcendent, which, as you said, is okay. It's okay to know it, but only at best it can give me a very broad ultimate origin. Second is cosmic level. Cosmic level is, it's good to understand that how creation is operating, whether it's going in the line of the Agni or going away from Agni. That's what in Indian thought was Dharma and Adharma. Dharma and Adharma had nothing to do with moral rules. It had to do with whether you are aligned with this original will or you are not aligned with the original will. So that becomes larger picture, nation, civilization. But again, third level at which it is expressing is through the individual. Now it's very interesting that individual aspect comes actually with man, and man too after a certain point of evolution. So if we look at animals, it's like a mass movement. Even humanity up to a certain point, it's a purely mass movement. But a time comes when we begin to become aware of something called as individual, me, mine. Now ordinarily it is the ego individuality, my name, my form, my qualification, my job. But behind this, there is a true individuality which is developing, like the child in the palna, crib. What do you call it? So, the crib is the outer ego personality. The real child is who is sleeping right now. So, why this is required? This is required so that the child does not fall into the ground. So, when the soul within us is very limited, yet not fully developed, then the ego individuality is required to safeguard it. But when the child develops, now you tell it, no, you have to be inside the crib. What it will do? It will jump across. So when this soul individuality develops to a point, you want to come out of the crib, and it expresses itself in certain very interesting ways. One is you begin to challenge everything, all the social norms. That way accelerated evolution has started. Because you want to individually live and understand those things. So the demand of today's children to understand why we are doing what we are doing is very, very valid. In fact, it's a sign of evolution. Because they are wanting to come out of the crib. It's a sign of a developed or a developing soul. So through the soul also the divine not only manifests himself, but it is the most important aspect, because that individual is the one through which this whole evolutionary process can be hastened. And because as individual, we become the meeting point of material nature. We all have a body, so material nature, and the divine whom a human being, a conscious human being can discover and unite. So our goal, our coming to individually, what we should do is, first we must discover our own highest. Well, now let me put the term, because the most beautiful term, divine. To discover the divine within and to discover the divine within the creation is my first job. And for that I don't need to leave the world, I don't need to leave my job, I have to reorient myself.
How do you do reorient?
So reorientation is, ego individuality says it's all for me. And see, this brings so much suffering. As a psychiatrist, I can tell you. The moment you say, this is my husband and my wife, see, in Indian custom, marriage ke samay you have fire at the center. So I keep telling them, don't put yourself in the center, you will burn. Center is fire, not husband or wife. Center is common aspiration. You can't put anybody, in-laws, parents, anybody, you are putting that person in a difficult spot. So what happens? We put people in that difficult spot. जहाँ डिवाइन को होना चाहिए वहाँ we say you should be Mr. Perfect or Miss Perfect. Now what you are doing, you are basically wanting the divine, and poor creature, he is going to break down, he tried and cannot fulfill. So, but that's how the ego reacts. My child, my son, my daughter, my father, and it is necessary up to a point, because otherwise we will say, oh, it doesn't matter. So when we are in that careless early stages, then we have to, nature fixes us. ये तेरा बेटा है, ये तेरा husband है, ये तेरा wife है, so that we operate through a very imperfect limited system. Otherwise we'll say, like many of these so-called progressive society which reverse the truth and say, nobody belongs to you, anything, so live like an animal. No, that's not what it meant. Now once we have gone through that training, then the next level is, the importance of this is only because ये डिवाइन ने मुझे दिया है, जितने समय के लिए दिया है. Then you don't suffer. I had once a couple who wanted to actually die. Why? Because they had a child who was hyperactive, and they were very distressed, very naturally. So I asked them only one question: supposing this child was not yours, but your brother or sister's, so would you take care the same way? He said, yes, maybe even more. So I asked, would you suffer the same way? And automatically they said no. See the difference? Just the attachment brings. Same thing, same event, absolutely same. And I have actually known instances where people took care as one's own, as, that little word as. And then, for whatever reason things didn't work out. But the sting of suffering that comes when you say mine, that is taken away. So we have to reorient our life by knowing that everything belongs to the divine. I also belong to the divine. So my life should be to fulfill the divine will in me. And equally, each one has the right to move along their own paths. But so long as they are with me, let me treat them as, little miniature divinities in the making. So we have that very beautiful answer by Yagnavalk, who was asked, why does one love the wife and child and country? And he said, Maitreyi, one loves the wife not for the sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self. One loves the child not for the sake of the child, but for the sake of the self. As is the self, so is the love. If the self is ego individuality, love is also like that. But if the self is the divine individuality, then everything changes. So this little reorientation is very fundamental. It takes time, but ultimately that is the truth of things. So, and nature leads us in that direction. अब बच्चे हैं, बड़े हो जाते हैं, children grow up. Every parent wants their child to be something or someone, they have their own narrative or agenda. Okay, but I don't know, most children, no child really fits into that agenda, because he's on his own journey after all, no? And it's a good thing because Each one is on their own journey. Now you see, if we only knew that what is my job is not to give him, he must be like this, then I am imposing my own ego structures onto the child. But he must discover himself, his own way, his own journey. Life will be so much beautiful. Even most practically, spirituality is which will make a life so much more beautiful. I have seen parents suffer that, oh, my child is not the child I would have wanted to be. But well, it's never like that. Child can equally say, you are not the parent that I would have wanted to have. I mean, each one is on their own unique journey, and that's the beauty of it. And this journey doesn't stop with one life. That's where the Indian thought comes in of rebirth. It's a journey that goes through lives, because this perfection that we have to build. There are individual souls at a very primitive stage of development. They need to go through very, very difficult experiences, challenging circumstances, like the brute in let's say, in the caveman. And there are individual souls which are very developed, where they see one event and their life changes. So because we all look alike, like human beings, it doesn't mean we are alike. Even we understand psychologically also, it is so true that while some of us are right now sitting and listening to Mother and Sri Aurobindo's and these profound truths, equally in the same city there would be many who would be enjoying not classical music, not even a good rap, but probably hard metal. So, well, now that's a primitive stage of development, and people will go through it. There are some who would be finding their most primitive joy in ganja or whatever it is. Whereas there are highly developed individualities which will find their joy in the divine contact within. So, look-alike is different. Everybody is wearing a human mask, but within human beings, because of this self-improvement, there is a big range. So, we need to understand all this, that as Khalil Gibran says, we need to nurture them, but we cannot, they must have their own thought, their own discoveries to make. So these are the changes, that where we are with everything, but we don't start thinking that these things are meant for me, for my. See, where does marriage end? That's a beauty. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, marriage is a beautiful thing, but as long as there is love, everything is fine. But what happens after marriage? If people don't have a common uplifting ideal, it either goes into shutting within a small little thing and the world, as if this little front and the world with which you are to battle, then we try to increase by hamare wale log. It's so primitive. But if we understand that we are together for a much greater purpose and a greater work and unite in that, life would be so beautiful. If let's say a couple comes together, like ancient times, you see the rishis and their wives, and they come together with a much higher purpose than simply they do their work, but their joining point is so deep, so high. So this reorientation we must have in individual life. At the same time, understand that each individual will progress along his own lines, not try to convert others to one's own way of belief, and however big or high it may be, we can suggest but never impose. Because if you impose, the problem is that you will make the other person stumble. Somebody is running and he is in Ladakh mountain going to touch Khardungla, and he tells somebody who is right now enjoying in Nainital, come, run up to me, and if he pushes too much, this fellow will die of hypoxia. So we have to understand that there are different paces, different stages through which we grow. This is a very wide and supple understanding of the world. But at the same time, focus on our own inner goal. That we should never lose. To lose that is the worst tragedy. So each one must find it, but it is through the individual that the divine manifests in this creation. It's a very important role. Nar Narayan, that's how Shri Krishna says in the Gita. In fact, the whole cosmos is like our gymnasium. And the first step toward that is discovering the divine. I think at least discovering the soul within. The soul should not be just a word we use. हाँ कुछ है जो नैनम छद्दंत्री शिस्त्राणी नैनम दाति पावका. That is, that can be a solace to a wounded heart, but unless you experience the soul, it never becomes real. So, we should try to find the soul, if you ask me, as an individual, first step. All else is later on. And this rebirth is a mechanism through which the soul grows. The moment you admit there is a soul, rebirth becomes a logical necessity. Otherwise, to imagine that, whoever, God or creator, someone put a soul randomly for one lifetime in some religion or something. Rare religions, even they say you are either condemned eternally, damned, or I have never heard anything more illogical than that. I say it's better you don't believe in soul, I understand that part. But if you say there is a soul, but one life, it is completely nonsensical thing. But then what is it doing there? To be redeemed of what? Why did it enter into all this? Who threw it into this mud and muddle? And then says change your name and belief system and you will be redeemed. I mean, there can be nothing more ridiculous than that. So people who challenge sometimes the existence of God and soul, they are much better than these kind of fixed belief systems. That's also we see nowadays happening all over the world. So, and then we need to make our own discovery. We should neither believe just because we want to believe, nor we should disbelieve because that's the fashion. It's fashionable to say that, well, I don't believe in God. No, search. And after all, to be happy within the limited frame is much worse. That is also true. We must make a genuine search.
When you say rebirth, to the first topic, can you give one or two lines that what is the problem of rebirth?
Yes, the problem is in the sense that, as I said, number one, if there is a soul, then rebirth becomes a logical necessity because soul is the seed of the divine. And the seed must grow into a tree. And to grow into the tree, it needs all the experiences of various kinds, which act like feeders. To imagine that this little finite soul can grow into infinity in one lifetime with very limited experiences, very limited scope, is to, believe in the impossible. Well, a life will come when it is in that last phase. Usually when aspiration awakes, there are just 2 or 3 lives around the corner. But otherwise it will go through many lifetimes. Meaning thereby the purpose of rebirth is basically to learn and grow and evolve into what we secretly are. It's like the seed must grow into the tree. But this has become a problem because people have turned it into a reward and punishment, sin and virtue, which it's never for that. So it's like if a child doesn't do well in a particular subject, the teacher may say your handwriting is bad, write it 10 times. It's not a punishment. It's a help to become better. So the mechanisms of rebirth are to help us evolve and grow. So when we start looking at life through this lens, then it's so beautiful. The problem comes when I say it is sin and virtue and it's reward and punishment, because then it's an end point. If I am suffering, it's a punishment. So what do? Accept the punishment quietly and go through. But it is never meant for that. If you don't get the message and the lesson, it will come again. Or if I believe whatever I am enjoying today is because of reward of some good deed I may have done. So, to imagine that a creator has jobless except, giving us reward and punishment it's a primitive notion of the divine working. But it's for the growth toward the Godhead. Everybody is destined to grow towards that. That is the other beautiful thing about Vedanta. It doesn't matter. You may belong to this religion today, it is really irrelevant. The seed will grow into a tree. Some may take 10, some may take 100 lives. That's the only difference. You can hasten the process or you can compress the process. The more you delay the process, the more suffering comes, because you are delaying something which is your inevitable destiny. So, most logically, the most logical thing to do is to hasten it by discovering yourself. But not knowing it, this cycle of rebirth appears meaningless. So the problem is, when we look at it all purely as reward and punishment, this world as a kind of punishment, grand punishment, there is a narrative like that. So that becomes a problem. Now this one part. Then in problem of rebirth, Sri Aurobindo also says, who is the one which is reborn? So Buddhist will say some information, some mental energy. But mental energy eventually will dissolve like all energies. So only something which is a portion of the divine will not dissolve, because divine is is the immutable. The soul is not immutable, but it is immortal. So it is something of the divine ansha which is inside us. So this is the second aspect he takes up. Third is that whether, why don't we remember the past personalities? Well, it's a blessing. एक जिंदगी के तो रिलेशन संभलते नहीं है. Imagine, you remembered, he was also my father-in-law. That person was my child. Now, it'll be too chaotic, confusing. It's a grace, blessing that we don't remember, because we have to move forward. So this is an absurd logic that you should remember. By the way, we don't even remember 5-year-old. When parents show you, you were 5-year-old. Is it? You are very cute. You can't connect. What's so cute about? So not remembering is basically helping us. Imagine a child who is stuck at 5 years of age. It's not something good, no? You have to move on. So in rebirth, memories are removed, but essence remains. So for example, in schooling process, we may not remember the complex trigonometries that we studied in whatever, 7th or 8th. But it has shaped our minds. To that extent, it is helpful. So we need not remember, but the essence of that life goes with us. That is the saving point. So this is how the process of rebirth takes place. So what happens after death? After death, soul always is beautiful, regardless of all the outer coverings. But then these coverings begin to dissolve, like the masks. So the physical body, we know that it goes through disintegration. Then the vital body, which is the nervous sheath, which may have gone through pleasant or painful experiences, that dissolves. Then the emotional being with all its attachment, they begin to be unplugged. Nature starts unplugging you because it's needed. And that's why those who are left behind, they are told that let the person go, because if you tie with your heartstrings, you are not helping. You are actually ending up in a way delaying the progress. So emotional strings, they begin to get slowly removed. Then if there was a kind of mental development, so the soul absorbs whatever it had to learn, and then it dissolves that also. And then it goes and rests with the divine in a beautiful sleep. Because as far as soul is concerned, it knows the divine, it goes to the divine. It is always in a state of peace and joy. Regardless of whatever it may have gone through, trauma and everything is experienced by the nervous sheath, by the emotional being, even by the intellectual being, but not by the soul. Soul takes the experience and progresses. So we can take an example in our own life. When we were going through exams in, say, grade 1, grade 2, it was like the end of the world, or a heartbreak, an adolescent. But when you grow later on, you laugh at it. अरे जब मैं छोटा था, मैं तो fail हो गया था, as if it's a matter of great pride. But that's a fact. When you look back, you laugh at things which at that point of time appeared to you as the end of the world. So, as far as the soul is concerned, it ultimately transmutes all experience into delight. Sri Aurobindo describes like that in Savitri. It transmutes all things into delight. End point is currency, what you have gathered is delight. That helps us. And the knowledge of a lifetime. And then it projects into a new life, takes a new body for progress, next level of progress. So when we understand life from this poise, There is no real scope of grief. It will still strike us because ignorantly we are attached. But we have to keep reorienting ourselves that look, this is the way I am looking at it ignorantly. But there is another vision which the wise have told us. Let us rely on that till we ourselves reclaim that vision. You may say that, well, we don't experience it. Yes, so that's why we have the people who have gone, they tell us. Next level is, I must also reclaim that vision. So when we know that soul assumes this outer personality which is going to disintegrate, after a point the soul has no such recognition, you are my parent, you are my child, no recognition of that. There are interesting stories like that. Even the mother describes about a 4-year-old child who had passed away, and the parents came, they were in quite a shock, obviously. And the soul of the child comes. When mother is giving flowers, the child is saying, give this one, very happily. Mother says, if I were to tell this to them, they would not understand. But the soul is very happy to be near the mother. And even saying that, give this flower to my parents, smiling and happily. So, a lot of our suffering is because we are projecting our own limited consciousness onto things which are in a different space-time domain. So, that's how we have to look at it. That's why they say that, reading these, the Gita, and now of course we have Savitri, it completely liberates you from all sense of grief, suffering. Just read a few lines and it makes us so wide, so deep. Then you wonder at like a grown-up person would laugh at a child whose toy was snatched, and the child is as if the whole world has come crashing. Parents will smile and say, "Koi baat nahi hai, mil jayega dusra tujhe, abhi to padhai kar." That's how parents would sometimes console, sometimes just smile that the child doesn't understand that it's a toy. So when we read Savitri, it automatically takes us to those states of consciousness. The purpose of Savitri is like a mantra, it opens the door to the consciousness from where Savitri has emerged. Actually, any book does that unwittingly. When you read a book, through the book you come into contact with the author's consciousness. That's why it's so important to be careful about the books we read. So when we read Savitri, I have not found a single book more not only nourishing spiritually, but it has the power to evaporate depression. And sometimes so magically that we wonder, why am I not feeling the suffering that I should feel? I have seen that also. Because it evaporates, it opens the door to a different consciousness, randomly. Of course, we call back the sorrows. But if you read regularly, Savitri ka sevan din mein 3 baar, 2 chammach, 2 paragraph. It's liberating, absolutely. So read Savitri, whatever one can, at least twice a day.
Any particular chapter of Savitri you suggest to read?
Well, whole of Savitri, but it depends on like for instance, when one is going through the fate, what is fate? So we end up blaming ourselves, complaining ourselves, thinking all this is reward, punishment. So read the book of fate, you'll be very clear that none of this is true. The game is different. I didn't know the game, so book of fate. Then if one wants to be really in the company of the divine, which is ultimately the most liberating, read the book of the Divine Mother, especially, Adoration of the Divine Mother. It is so liberating. You are transported to a different place altogether. Then if one is harrowed by this idea of kya hoga, future mein kya hoga, read book 11, you will see that, well, in spite of appearances, future is beautiful and divine. So, if we want to understand the mystery of creation, read the secret knowledge, because we have a very limited understanding of this world, and that makes us also suffer. So when we read a canto like The Secret Knowledge, and if you want to read the most original love story, which is the love of the soul with the divine. Read the book of love, how the soul gives itself to the Divine Mother and all is done for it. If we want to understand what really death is, and that there is a power greater than death, then the entire book of death and it's... So ultimately the whole of Savitri. So it is the ultimate book or remedy, I don't know what to say. It is ultimately the love of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Its beauty is it is the combined consciousness of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Sri Aurobindo is written and he has written about the Mother's story. But his own story has entered into it. So their life is woven into it. It is the joint Mother and Sri Aurobindo together. So you can imagine that through the word we can come in contact with them, because it's more difficult to meditate. Sometimes people say that I find it difficult to meditate either during some period or otherwise to contact with the Mother. So read Savitri. It's a simple way of coming in contact with the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And I'm so happy that they wrote in English. मतलब संस्कृत में लिखते तो पता नहीं क्या होता. हम पहले तो वही कि करेक्ट उच्चारण सही है कि नहीं है, माते है बोलना है कि माता बोलना है, ये सब में प्रॉब्लम हो जाता. Abhi, he has written in language which at least by and large we all know, and I must say that it's very simple. It's not a difficult book at all. If we take away from the mind this idea that Sri Aurobindo has written, it's very easy. Language is very simple. Little bit orienting is required. That's why many of these talks are just to orient us. Though even without it, it can be read. So it helps us to progress, it helps us to discover the soul. I think that can be a good point to stop unless somebody has a question.
This Babaji Maharaj said that don't only read it, don't have to understand this.
Yes, and that comes, Savitri makes us understand, because Savitri is a living presence. Savitri is not a book, so she makes us understand. It's like when you go to a teacher. I remember when our son, he went to ashram school, so kindergarten. It gave me a lesson. So when he, as first class, first moment enters, ki, lo. So the teacher started, she threw the ball. I still remember Smith, so she threw the ball and said in French. Basically she said, go and pick it up, bring it back. So we just said, he doesn't know French. He said, don't worry. She told us, you stop, it's my job to teach him French. So when it was a lesson of life that when we read Savitri, Savitri is a living consciousness. When you go to a teacher, it's the teacher's job to make you understand the subject. Okay, so Savitri is quite capable of explaining to us everything that is necessary for us at a given point of time. So a teacher will always reveal that much, which one is ready. Kindergarten mein teacher will not say E is a unit of energy and M means mass and C means velocity of light. Teacher will not say all that thing. Teacher will say A comes after D and before F. Because at that stage, that's all that we need to learn. So to each one, Savitri will reveal itself to whatever extent we are ready. But if we persist with it, one day it will also teach us the equation E equals to mc square and beyond. So we should keep reading it, and Savitri will teach us everything.